I never believed in fate until that autumn afternoon when everything changed in Elena's cramped vintage boutique. My name is Marina White, and I'm what most people call a wilderness guide. What they don't know is that I spend my days uncovering secrets the forest has kept for centuries. 3 weeks ago, while leading an archaeological team through the dense Virginia woods outside Richmond, I discovered something that made my heart race. Tucked beneath the roots of a centuries-old oak were documents wrapped in oiled leather, tribal records that could rewrite local history. The rain drummed against Elena's shop windows as I pushed through the door, shaking droplets from my black hair. I needed something professional for next week's grant presentation, something that wouldn't scream "I sleep under stars" more than roofs. The competition for the cultural preservation grant was fierce, and $50,000 could finally make my dream of opening a Native American cultural center reality. My fingers found the soft leather of a 1942 jacket hanging near the back. Perfect. As I lifted it from the rack, another hand brushed mine. "Oh, I'm sorry." I looked up into the bluest eyes I'd ever seen. The woman was maybe 5'6", blonde hair escaping from what had probably started as a neat bun. She wore a cardigan that belonged in a library, which somehow made her more intriguing. "No problem," I said, though neither of us let go of the jacket. "Stella Foster." She offered a small smile. "And I have terrible timing, apparently. Marina White. And actually, your timing might be perfect." Elena appeared beside us, silver bracelets jingling. Ladies, I have 2 jackets, you know." But we were already laughing, the tension breaking like morning frost. Stella had this way of tilting her head when she was amused, and I found myself wanting to see it again. "Coffee?" I asked, surprising myself. "There's a place across the street." 20 minutes later, we sat in mismatched chairs at Grind Coffee, steam rising from our mugs. Stella worked at the Richmond Public Library's Special Collections Department, a job that sounded mind-numbingly quiet until she described hunting down rare manuscripts like a detective. "Last month, I tracked down a first edition that had been missing for 30 years, she said, eyes lighting up. "Found it in an estate sale, mislabeled as a cookbook. I know the feeling. I just found something in the woods that's been missing even longer." She leaned forward. "What kind of something?" I hesitated. Trust didn't come easily to me, but something about Stella felt different. Safe, tribal land records, documents that could prove my people had settlements here long before anyone thought possible. "That's incredible. Are you working with the Virginia Historical Society?" "Trying to. I'm competing for a cultural preservation grant, but the research requirements are crushing. I need access to archives I don't have clearance for." Stella was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "I might be able to help with that." "Why would you?" She shrugged, but her cheeks flushed pink. "Maybe because you're the first person I've met who gets as excited about dusty old documents as I do." The rain had stopped by the time we left the coffee shop. We stood on the sidewalk, neither wanting to break the spell. "Tomorrow night?" Stella asked. "The library has extended hours. I could show you the restricted archives." "You'd do that for a stranger?" "Are we strangers?" She stepped closer, and I caught the faint scent of lavender. "Because it doesn't feel like it." Something shifted in the space between us, electric and warm. When she smiled, really smiled, it transformed her entire face. "Tomorrow night then," I said. As I watched her walk away, jacket bag swinging at her side, I had the strangest feeling that my life had just taken a turn I hadn't seen coming. The documents in my truck suddenly felt less important than the librarian who might help me unlock their secrets. The next evening found me standing outside Richmond Public Library at closing time, feeling more nervous than I had before any wilderness expedition. Through the tall windows, I could see Stella moving between the stacks, her blonde hair catching the lamplight. She unlocked the door with a conspiratorial smile. "Ready for some after-hours adventure?" The library felt different in the quiet darkness, full of whispered secrets. Stella led me through corridors I hadn't known existed, past reading rooms, and into the heart of the building where the real treasures lived. "This is my domain," she said, gesturing to the climate-controlled archives. "Temperature 70 degrees, humidity controlled, and absolutely no food or drinks allowed." What about rule-breaking librarians? Especially not those. But her eyes sparkled as she said it. The restricted section was exactly what I'd imagined, all dark wood, and glass cases filled with documents that could rewrite history. Stella pulled on white cotton gloves and began retrieving boxes with practiced efficiency. Virginia Colonial Records, 1607 to 1750, she announced, and some Native American treaty documents that might interest you. As we worked side by side, I found myself stealing glances at her profile. She had this intense focus when examining documents, like she was having conversations with the past. Her fingers moved over pages with reverence. "Tell me about the grant competition," she said without looking up. $50,000 for cultural preservation projects. The catch is proving historical significance with documented evidence. I spread out photocopies of my forest discovery. These suggest my ancestors had permanent settlements here 2 centuries earlier than recorded history claims. Stella's breath caught as she examined the copies. "Marina, if these are authentic, they're remarkable. But you'll need supporting documentation. That's where I'm stuck. I need access to colonial land surveys, missionary records, anything that might reference native settlements. I can get you all of that." She looked up, and something had shifted in her expression. "But there's something you should know. You're not the only one researching this topic." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Jake Watson. He's been requesting similar materials for weeks. Says he's working on a cultural history project too." "Jake Watson?" The name hit like cold water. Tall guy, expensive suits, talks like he's running for office. "You know him?" "He's my main competition for the grant. Damn it." I ran a hand through my hair. "What exactly has he been looking at?" Stella hesitated, clearly torn between professional ethics and whatever was growing between us. "Technically, I shouldn't discuss other patrons' research." "Stella." I moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gray in her blue eyes. "This isn't just about money. It's about preserving my heritage, my grandmother's stories. If Jake's using his connections to get ahead." He requested the Jamestown settlement papers, early colonial correspondence, some of the same missionary records you'd need. The implications sank in. Jake had political connections, funding, and apparently a head start on research. But he didn't have what I had, authentic connection to the land and its history. "I can help level the playing field," Stella said quietly. "Give you access to everything he's seen, plus materials he might not know exist." "Why would you risk your job for me?" She was quiet for a long moment, then reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. The touch sent warmth shooting up my arm. "Because yesterday, when you talked about your grandmother's stories, your whole face changed. You weren't just discussing history. You were sharing your soul." Her thumb traced across my knuckles. "And because I've spent 5 years in this job helping researchers, but I've never felt invested in their success until now." The air between us crackled with possibility. In the dim light of the archives, surrounded by centuries of secrets, Stella looked almost ethereal. When she leaned closer, I could smell that faint lavender again. "Marina? Yeah? I think we should work together. Officially, I mean. Research partners. Is that what we're calling it?" Her smile was answer enough. When she stood to retrieve another box of documents, I watched the graceful way she moved through her sanctuary. Something was happening between us, something that felt bigger than grant competitions or historical research. "Here," she said, returning with an armload of materials. "Colonial surveyor maps from 1690. If your settlements existed, there might be references to native clearings or structures." As we bent over the maps together, her shoulder pressed against mine. The warmth of her proximity made concentration difficult, but I forced myself to focus on the faded ink and careful notations. "Look at this," I whispered, pointing to a marking near what was now the forest where I'd found the documents. "Unknown structures, possibly seasonal habitation." "That's not far from where you found your documents," Stella breathed. Our faces were inches apart now, both of us pretending to study the map while electricity arced between us. When I turned my head, her lips were right there. The kiss was soft, tentative, like a question being asked. When I didn't pull away, she deepened it slightly, her hand coming up to rest against my cheek. We broke apart slowly. both breathing unsteadily. That wasn't very professional, she whispered. Good thing we're after hours. Late nights in the library became our ritual. Over the following week, Stella and I fell into an easy rhythm, meeting after her official hours ended to dive deeper into the archives. What started as research assistance had evolved into something that made my chest tight with anticipation every evening. Look at this, Stella said, pulling out a leather-bound journal. Father M.C. Kenzie's missionary records from 1695. He mentions trading with native settlements along the James River. I leaned over her shoulder, breathing in that familiar lavender scent. This is incredible. He's describing seasonal fishing camps exactly where my documents were found. The basement archives felt like our own private world. Stella had shown me hidden passages between sections, explained the library's secret history while we worked by lamplight. I was learning she had layers I hadn't expected. Beneath the proper librarian exterior was someone with surprising boldness. You know what I realized today? She said, not looking up from Mackenzie's journal. What? I've been happier this week than I have in months, maybe years. Because of dusty old papers? Because of you. She met my eyes and I saw vulnerability there that made my heart skip. Is that crazy? We barely know each other. Feels like I've known you longer than that. I reached across the table and took her hand. Tell me something about yourself nobody else knows. She was quiet for a moment, thumb tracing circles on my palm. I became a librarian because I was afraid of the real world. Books felt safer than people. Predictable. And now? Now I'm in a library basement at 10 p.m. with someone who makes me want to be brave. The air between us shifted, charged with something deeper than attraction. When Stella stood and walked to the narrow window showing the parking lot, I followed. My grandmother used to say that some meetings are written in the stars long before they happen, I said, standing close behind her. Do you believe that? I'm starting to. She turned in the small space between me and the window, her back pressed against the cool glass. Marina? Yeah? I want to kiss you again. Properly this time. I didn't need to be asked twice. This kiss was different from our tentative first one, deeper, more certain. Her hands came up to frame my face as I pressed closer, feeling the rapid beat of her heart against my chest. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Damn, she whispered. My thoughts exactly. Rain started pattering against the window behind her, the sound mixing with our unsteady breathing. Outside, autumn lightning flickered across the Richmond skyline, illuminating her face in quick flashes. I should tell you something, I said, still holding her close. This grant competition isn't just about money. If I win, I can finally honor my grandmother's dream. She wanted to build a place where our stories wouldn't be forgotten. Tell me about her. She raised me after my parents died. Taught me to read the forest, to listen to what the land remembers. She used to say our ancestors left messages in the trees, in the stone formations, in places where the earth holds memory. Stella's fingers traced along my cheek. That's beautiful. She passed 5 years ago. I've been trying to make her dream real ever since. And Jake Watson? He sees dollar signs and political opportunities. He doesn't understand what we're really preserving. I brushed a strand of blonde hair from her face. But you do. You get why this matters. Because history without heart is just dates and names. Exactly. The storm outside intensified, rain drumming harder against the windows. Stella shivered slightly, and I wrapped my arms around her more tightly. I have an idea, she said. Why don't I show you the restricted collection upstairs? The really restricted one. There's a higher security level. Climate-controlled rare book room. Only 3 people have access. Her smile turned mischievous. Want to see some actual treasures? Following her through the darkened library felt like a midnight adventure. The rare book room was smaller than the archives, lined with glass cases containing volumes that probably cost more than my truck. But what caught my attention was the comfortable reading chair by another tall window. This is where I come when I need to think, Stella said. Or when the world feels too complicated. Does it feel complicated now? Beautifully complicated. She settled into the chair and pulled me down beside her. The space was really meant for one person, forcing us close together. Lightning continued to flash outside, casting moving shadows across her face. I keep thinking about timing, she said softly. How you walked into Elena's shop at exactly the right moment. How you needed research help, and I happened to have access. How everything just fits. My grandmother would say the ancestors are watching out for us. Maybe they are. When she kissed me this time, it was soft and searching, like she was memorizing the moment. I lost myself in the warmth of her mouth, the gentle pressure of her lips. My hands found the soft skin at the base of her neck, and she made a small sound that sent heat pooling in my stomach. The rain continued its rhythm against the window, as we held each other in the chair meant for one, surrounded by centuries of preserved words and stories. In that moment, with Stella's heartbeat steady against my chest, I felt like we were writing our own chapter in the library's long history of keeping precious things safe. Come with me this weekend, I said Friday evening, as we packed up research materials. I want to show you the forest where I found the documents. Stella looked up from the colonial maps we'd been studying. Camping? Just one night. I have a feeling you need to see the actual places we're reading about. Feel the connection. She bit her lower lip, a gesture I'd learned meant she was weighing risk against desire. I've never been camping. Like, ever. I'll take care of you, trust me. Saturday morning found us loading gear into my truck. Stella had borrowed hiking boots from a friend, and looked adorably out of place in her new outdoor attire. The crisp autumn air carried promises of changing seasons as we drove into the Virginia wilderness. It's beautiful, she breathed as we hiked the forest trail. Golden leaves drifted down around us, and shafts of sunlight created natural spotlights through the canopy. This is nothing. Wait until you see the sacred grove. An hour later, I led her to the clearing where I'd found the documents. Ancient oaks formed a natural circle, their massive trunks scarred with age and weather. In the center, a small creek wound between moss-covered stones. Oh, Stella whispered. I can feel it. The history here. My grandmother said places like this hold memory in the earth itself. I knelt beside the creek, running my fingers through the cool water. She taught me to listen. Stella sat beside me, her presence warm against the afternoon chill. What do you hear? Stories. Laughter around ancient fires. Children playing by this same water centuries ago. I looked at her. What do you feel? Peace. Like coming home to a place I've never been. As the sun began its descent, I showed her the basics of wilderness survival. She was a surprisingly quick learner, picking up fire-building techniques and camp setup with determined focus. When she successfully lit our campfire on her third try, her triumphant smile made my chest tight with affection. I can't believe I've lived 30 years without knowing how to do this, she said, as we shared dinner from my camping supplies. Most people never learn. They're afraid of the wild. Were you ever afraid? Of the forest? Never. Of other things? Constantly. She moved closer on the log we'd dragged near the fire. What kinds of things? Failing my grandmother. Not being strong enough to preserve what she wanted saved. Being alone. I met her eyes across the dancing flames. Not anymore, though. Marina. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But something about you feels inevitable. Instead of answering with words, she kissed me. The firelight painted her face golden, and when her hands tangled in my hair, I forgot about everything except the warmth of her mouth and the soft sounds she made against my lips. Tell me about your dreams, she whispered when we broke apart. The cultural center, a place where kids can learn traditional skills, where elders can share stories, where history lives instead of just being preserved in books. It sounds perfect. What about your dreams? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I used to think I didn't have any, just wanted security, predictability, but lately, she looked at me. Lately I've been dreaming about adventures, about being brave enough for a bigger life. You are brave. You're here, aren't you? Because of you. As the fire burned lower, we retreated to my tent. The space was small, forcing us close together in our sleeping bags. Outside, the forest settled into night sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Stella? Thank you for helping with the research, for believing in what I'm trying to do. She turned to face me in the dim light filtering through the tent walls. Thank you for showing me there's a world outside library walls. When she kissed me this time, it was different. Hungrier. Her hands found the hem of my shirt, and I felt her fingers, cool against my warm skin. The kiss deepened as I pulled her closer, feeling every curve of her body pressed against mine. "Are you sure?" I whispered against her neck. "I've never been more sure of anything." We moved together slowly, learning each other's rhythms in the intimate darkness. Her skin was soft as silk under my hands, and when she arched against me, I felt like I was discovering something sacred. Every touch, every whispered endearment felt like a promise neither of us was ready to voice, but both of us understood. Afterwards, we lay tangled together, listening to the creek's gentle murmur and the wind sighing through the ancient oaks. Stella traced lazy patterns on my shoulder, her breathing gradually slowing. "I never expected this," she said quietly. "This? You, us." Feeling like my whole life just shifted into focus, I pressed a kiss to her forehead. My grandmother used to say, "Love arrives when you're busy looking for something else." Were we looking for something else? I was looking for historical evidence. You were looking for adventure. And instead, we found each other. As dawn filtered through the tent, painting everything in soft gold, I watched Stella sleep and felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or certainty. For the first time since my grandmother's death, the future looked like something worth fighting for. The grant presentation deadline loomed just 3 weeks away when Jake Watson made his move. I was updating my research notes in Stella's favorite coffee shop when he slid into the seat across from me, his expensive suit somehow making the cozy space feel smaller. "Marina White," he said, flashing that politician's smile. "Mind if I join you?" "Actually, I do. Come now. We're both working toward the same goal. Cultural preservation, right?" I set down my coffee and studied his face. Jake was handsome in that polished way that suggested personal trainers and professional styling. Everything about him screamed money and connections. My understanding is we're competing against each other. Competition implies we're equals. We both know I have advantages you don't. He leaned back, confident. But I respect what you're trying to do. The whole noble savage thing plays well with the committee. Heat flashed through me. "Excuse me?" "I didn't mean offense. I'm just saying maybe we could work together instead of against each other. Pool resources, split the grant money." "Why would you want to do that?" His smile sharpened. "Because I've done my homework on the judges. They love authenticity, and you've got that in spades. But they also respond to professional presentation, political backing, institutional support, things I happen to excel at. And what makes you think I need your help?" "Well, for starters, I know you've been conducting unauthorized research at the public library, after hours, with a certain blonde librarian who doesn't have clearance to access the materials she's been showing you." The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. "You've been watching me. I've been thorough. It's amazing what security cameras capture these days. Very romantic, actually. Late-night research sessions in the restricted archives." The threat was clear, even wrapped in his smooth delivery. One word from him could cost Stella her job and destroy any chance I had of winning the grant through legitimate research. "What do you want, Jake?" "Partnership. You bring the authentic Native American angle, I bring the academic credibility and political support. We present together, split the money, everybody wins." "And if I refuse?" "Then I wonder what the library administration would think about their employees' after-hours activities, or how the grant committee might react to learning your research was obtained through improper channels." I forced myself to stay calm, though every instinct screamed at me to throw my coffee in his smug face. "I need time to think." "Of course. Take a day or two. But don't take too long. The presentation deadline is approaching, and I'd hate for either of us to miss this opportunity." After he left, I sat staring at my cooling coffee, mind racing. Jake had effectively cornered me. If I refused his offer, he could destroy both my chances and Stella's career. But partnering with him meant betraying everything my grandmother stood for. That evening, I found Stella in the archives, surrounded by even more colonial documents than usual. "I think I found something important," she said without looking up. "A surveyor's report from 1692 that specifically mentions permanent native structures in your forest area. Stella, we need to talk." Something in my tone made her look up sharply. "What's wrong?" I told her about Jake's visit, his implicit threats, his knowledge of our after-hours research. Watched her face go pale as the implications sank in. "He can't prove anything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Security cameras, Stella. He has footage of us here after hours." Shit. She ran a hand through her hair. "My job. I could lose my job. Not if I take his deal." "No." She stood quickly. "Absolutely not. You can't compromise your principles because of me. My principles won't matter if we're both destroyed. Marina, listen to me." She moved around the table, taking my hands. "What would your grandmother say about partnering with someone who threatens everything she believed in? She'd say protecting the people you love comes first. And I'm saying the people who love you don't want to be protected at the cost of your soul." We stared at each other across the weight of an impossible choice. Outside, autumn rain had started again, drumming against the library windows like impatient fingers. "There has to be another way," Stella said finally. "Jake has connections I can't compete with. Political backing, institutional support, probably half the grant committee in his pocket already. But he doesn't have what you have. Which is? Truth, authenticity, a genuine connection to the history you're preserving." She squeezed my hands. "And documents he doesn't know about." "What do you mean?" Stella's smile turned determined. "Remember those missionary records we found last week? Father M.C. Kenzie's detailed descriptions of the seasonal settlements? Jake requested colonial correspondence, but he specifically excluded missionary documents, said they weren't relevant to his research. So he doesn't know they exist. We have evidence he's never seen, documentation that could completely support your presentation without relying on anything he can challenge." Hope flickered in my chest. "You think that's enough?" "I think your grandmother raised someone who doesn't back down from bullies." Stella's eyes flashed with sudden steel. "And I think Jake Watson just made the mistake of threatening someone I care about." "Stella." "We're going to beat him, Marina, with better research, better presentation, and better understanding of what cultural preservation actually means." "What about your job?" "Let me worry about my job. Right now, we have work to do." As we settled back into research mode, I felt the familiar thrill of falling deeper in love. Not just with Stella's courage or her fierce loyalty, but with the way she said we were already an unbreakable team. Jake Watson wanted to play politics and make threats. Fine. But he was about to learn that some battles are won not with money or connections, but with heart, and stubborn determination to honor the past while building something better for the future. The pressure hit like an avalanche 2 weeks before the presentation deadline. Every waking moment became consumed with perfecting my proposal, cross-referencing, documents, and preparing for what felt like the performance of my life. The cultural center wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a necessity. The only way to honor everything my grandmother had sacrificed. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I found myself working 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and desperation, pushing deeper into research, while the grant committee's expectations loomed larger. The $50,000 represented more than funding. It was validation that our history mattered, that stories passed down through generations deserved preservation. Stella tried to help, but I could see the strain wearing on both of us. Our easy intimacy from the camping trip felt fragile now, threatened by mounting stress and impossible deadlines. When she suggested taking breaks, I snapped. When she offered dinner, I declined. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said one evening, finding me hunched over survey maps in my apartment. "This is what it takes. This is obsession, Marina. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" I looked up, irritated by the interruption. "When's the last time you had $50,000 and your entire heritage riding on a single presentation?" Her face fell, and immediately I regretted the sharp words. But I was too far gone to take them back, too deep in the pressure cooker of perfectionism to see past my own desperation. "I'm trying to support you," she said quietly. "Then let me work." She left without another word, and I told myself it was better this way. Focus required sacrifice. Love was a luxury I couldn't afford until after the presentation. 3 days later, everything collapsed. Jake Watson appeared at my door with a folder of documents and that same predatory smile. "Change of plans," he announced, pushing past me into my living room. "I've decided partnerships aren't necessary after all." "What are you talking about?" I'm talking about these. He spread photographs across my coffee table, images of Stella and me in the library archives, time-stamped and detailed. Amazing what private investigators can capture these days. My blood turned cold. You hired someone to follow us? I hired someone to document unauthorized access to restricted materials. The library board is very interested in employee misconduct, especially when it involves potential theft of intellectual property. Stella never stole anything. She provided you with privileged access to materials other researchers can't see. That's academic fraud at minimum, career-ending scandal at worst. The room spun around me. What do you want? I want you to withdraw from the competition, publicly. Cite personal reasons, family obligations, whatever sounds believable. And if I don't? Then tomorrow morning, the library board receives these photographs, along with detailed documentation of every after-hours session. Your girlfriend loses her job, her professional reputation, probably her career in library science altogether. Jake gathered the photos with theatrical precision. Oh, and the grant committee also receives copies. Can't have fraudulent research influencing their decision. After he left, I collapsed onto my couch, staring at the space where the photographs had been. Everything I'd worked for, every dream I'd built, crumbling because I'd fallen in love with someone who'd tried to help me. My phone buzzed with a text from Stella. Dinner tonight? Miss you. I stared at the message until the words blurred. How could I tell her that loving me had destroyed her career? That my grandmother's dream had become a nightmare threatening everything she'd worked for? Instead of answering, I poured myself a drink. Then another. The alcohol burned away the sharp edges of panic, leaving behind a dull ache of inevitability. The next morning found me hungover and hollow, standing in Stella's library section as she shelved returned books. She looked up with that radiant smile that had first caught my attention, and I felt my heart break a little more. Marina, I wasn't expecting you this early. We need to talk. Something in my tone made her smile fade. What's wrong? This isn't working. Us, I mean. The timing is all wrong. What are you talking about? I forced myself to look at her directly, to deliver the lie with enough conviction to make her believe it. I'm too focused on the grant right now. I don't have space for a relationship. Marina, no. We talked about this. We're a team. We're a distraction. I've been fooling myself thinking I could handle both. Her face crumpled, confusion giving way to hurt. This is about the pressure. You're overwhelmed, but we can work through it. There's nothing to work through. I made a mistake getting involved while my future was uncertain. You don't mean that. But I was already walking away, leaving her standing between the stacks with tears starting to gather in those beautiful blue eyes. Each step felt like tearing away pieces of my own heart, but Jake's threat echoed in my head with every footfall. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment and drafted my withdrawal letter from the grant competition. Official letterhead, professional language, citing personal obligations that prevented me from completing the application process. My grandmother's photograph watched from the mantel as I sealed the envelope. Her eyes seemed to hold disappointment, but also understanding. She'd made sacrifices too, chosen survival over idealism more than once. I'm sorry, I whispered to her picture. But I can't let him destroy her. The letter went in the mail the next morning. By afternoon, Jake had called to confirm he'd received word of my withdrawal. His satisfaction was audible even through the phone. Smart choice, Marina. Now everyone wins. Everyone except Stella, who'd lost the person she'd opened her heart to. Everyone except me, watching my heritage disappear into political maneuvering and strategic partnerships. Everyone except my grandmother's ghost, whose dreams I'd just sacrificed, to protect someone who might never forgive me for the betrayal. 3 days after I withdrew from the competition, Elena Martinez knocked on my apartment door. The vintage shop owner stood in my hallway holding a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd run out of patience. You look like hell, she announced, pushing past me into the living room. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. What I need is an explanation for why my 2 favorite customers both look like they've been hit by trucks. Elena settled onto my couch uninvited. Stella came into the shop yesterday crying. You haven't answered your phone in days. It's complicated. Try me. I found myself telling Elena everything. Jake's threats, the photographs, my impossible choice between Stella's career and my grandmother's dream. Elena listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing more furious with each detail. That son of a bitch, she said when I finished. He had me cornered. What else could I do? Fight back, you idiot. With what? He has money, connections, evidence of academic misconduct? Elena stood and began pacing my small living room. He has manipulation and coercion. There's a difference. Tell that to the library board when they fire Stella. Marina, listen to me very carefully. Elena stopped pacing and fixed me with a stare that could cut glass. Jake Watson has been coming into my shop for months, always asking questions about you two, always fishing for information about your relationship, your research schedule, your plans. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions? When you usually came in, whether you shopped together, if you seemed serious, I thought he was just nosy, maybe interested in you romantically. Elena's expression darkened. Now I realize he was gathering intelligence. That doesn't change anything. He still has those photographs. Does he? Or does he have staged surveillance that he commissioned specifically to create leverage? The implications hit me like cold water. You think he set us up? I think Jake Watson orchestrated this entire scenario to eliminate his biggest competition. And I think Stella deserves to know the truth before you destroy both your lives with noble stupidity. Elena, I can't risk it. If I'm wrong... If you're wrong, you're in the same position you are now. If you're right, you save both your futures and nail that manipulative bastard in the process. How do we prove it? Elena's smile turned predatory. Leave that to me. But first you need to talk to Stella. The real truth this time. An hour later, I stood outside the Richmond Public Library, heart hammering against my ribs. Through the windows, I could see Stella at her usual desk, but everything about her seemed dimmed. Her shoulders curved inward. Her movements lacked their usual grace. She looked up when I approached, and the pain in her eyes almost made me turn around. Marina. Her voice was carefully neutral. What are you doing here? I came to tell you the truth. I thought you already did that. I sat down across from her, ignoring the curious looks from other patrons. Jake blackmailed me. He had photographs of us in the archives, threatened to destroy your career if I didn't withdraw from the competition. Stella stared at me for a long moment. So you chose to break my heart instead. I chose to protect you. Without asking what I wanted? The simple question cut deeper than any accusation. I panicked. I couldn't bear the thought of him destroying everything you'd worked for because of me. Did it occur to you that maybe I'm strong enough to handle my own battles? Stella... No. Let me finish. Her voice carried steel I'd rarely heard before. You made a unilateral decision about our relationship based on fear. You decided I was too fragile to face consequences for my own choices. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Poor little librarian can't handle the big bad world, needs noble Marina to sacrifice herself for my protection. The anger in her voice was worse than tears would have been. You're right. I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth. Yes, you should have. Elena thinks Jake orchestrated the whole thing. Set us up from the beginning to create blackmail material. Stella's expression sharpened. What kind of evidence? She says he's been asking questions about us for months, fishing for information about our schedules, our relationship, our research patterns. That bastard. Stella's fury was beautiful and terrible. He played us both. Elena thinks she can prove it, but I needed you to know everything first. I needed to apologize for not trusting you with the truth. Marina. Stella's voice softened slightly. I understand why you panicked. But partnerships mean making decisions together, especially the hard ones. Does this mean you forgive me? This means I'm willing to consider it if you help me destroy Jake Watson's entire scheme. How? Stella's smile turned dangerous. By doing what we should have done from the beginning, fighting back together. The competition deadline passed yesterday. For regular submissions, yes. But the committee accepts late applications under special circumstances. Stella leaned forward. Like evidence of academic misconduct or manipulation by competing applicants. You want to re-enter the competition? I want to expose Jake for the manipulative fraud he is, restore your grandmother, his dream, and show him what happens when he threatens people I care about. The familiar thrill of falling deeper in love hit me as I watched her plot our counterattack. This wasn't the quiet librarian I'd first met in Elena's shop. This was a warrior defending everything we'd built together. Stella? Yeah? I love you. And I'm sorry I forgot that love means trusting someone to be strong enough to handle the truth. She reached across the table and took my hand. I love you too. And next time you want to make noble sacrifices, discuss it with me first. Deal. Good. Now, let's go save your heritage and destroy that smug son of a bitch in the process. As we left the library together, I felt the familiar certainty that had been missing for days. Whatever Jake had planned, he was about to discover that some partnerships are stronger than blackmail, and some love is worth fighting for. Elena's evidence was more damning than we'd dared hope. Security footage from her shop showed Jake Watson conducting what looked like surveillance, photographing the library across the street and timing our arrivals. Phone records revealed calls to a private investigation service the week before his blackmail attempt. Most devastating of all, Elena had recorded their conversation when he'd tried to pump her for information about our relationship. This is incredible, Stella breathed as we reviewed the materials in Elena's back office. He documented his own conspiracy. Narcissists always do, Elena said grimly. They can't resist keeping trophies. 2 days before the grant committee's final decision, we walked into the Richmond Community Foundation offices with our emergency application. The receptionist looked skeptical until Stella explained we had evidence of academic misconduct affecting the competition. Within an hour, we were sitting across from the 3-person grant committee in their conference room. Dr. Sarah Chen, the foundation director, reviewed our materials with growing interest while her colleagues examined Elena's evidence against Jake. These allegations are serious, Dr. Chen said finally. Industrial espionage, harassment, manipulation of the competitive process. Jake Watson violated every principle of academic integrity, I said. He tried to eliminate competition through coercion rather than merit. Your original application was quite strong, committee member Dr. Rodriguez noted. The historical documentation supporting pre-colonial settlements is remarkable. Mr. Watson's presentation yesterday was polished, Dr. Chen admitted, but lacked the authentic connection to community that characterizes truly impactful cultural preservation projects. What happens now? Stella asked. Now you present your proposal. We'll make our final decision tomorrow morning. The next 90 minutes felt like the most important of my life. I presented my grandmother's vision of the cultural center, supported by the historical evidence Stella and I had uncovered together. I spoke about honoring ancestral wisdom while building bridges to future generations, about creating space where stories could live and breathe instead of gathering dust in archives. Stella sat in the front row, her encouraging smile giving me strength when nerves threatened to overwhelm me. This was bigger than winning money. This was about proving that authentic passion could triumph over political manipulation. When I finished, the committee asked thoughtful questions about sustainability, community engagement, and long-term impact. Their interest felt genuine, engaged rather than perfunctory. Thank you, Ms. White, Dr. Chen said. We'll have our decision by 10 tomorrow morning. The waiting was torture. Stella and I spent the evening at my apartment, too nervous to eat too, anxious to focus on anything except the clock crawling toward morning. We laid on my couch together, her head on my chest, listening to each other's heartbeats. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said softly, I'm proud of what you built. The proposal, the research, the courage to fight back. We built it, I corrected. None of this happens without your help. Your grandmother would be proud too. I hope so. When anxiety made sleep impossible, we made love with desperate tenderness, clinging to each other as if physical connection could anchor us through uncertainty. Stella's skin was warm silk under my hands, her soft sounds a symphony that made everything else fade away. We moved together slowly, memorizing each touch, each whispered endearment. In the darkness of my bedroom, while the future hung in balance, we created our own certainty, out of need and trust and love, that felt stronger than any external validation. Afterwards, we held each other close, sharing breath and heartbeat and whispered promises about whatever came next. The phone rang at 9:57 the next morning. Dr. Chen's voice was formal but warm when Stella answered on speaker. "Ms. White, could you and S. Foster come in this morning? We'd like to discuss our decision with you." The foundation offices felt different somehow as we walked through the familiar hallways. Elena had insisted on coming for moral support, and she squeezed my hand as we entered the conference room. All 3 committee members were present, their expressions unreadable. Dr. Chen held an official-looking folder. After extensive review of all materials submitted, including the additional evidence of misconduct, "We've reached our decision." She opened the folder. "The Foundation is awarding the full $50,000 cultural preservation grant to Marina White for the Indigenous Heritage Cultural Center project." The room erupted. Elena whooped with joy, Stella threw her arms around me, and I felt my grandmother's presence so strongly it took my breath away. The dream that had sustained me through years of struggle was finally becoming reality. "Furthermore," Dr. Chen continued, "we're referring Mr. Watson's conduct to the State Ethics Board and removing his consulting firm from consideration for future foundation projects. Jake Watson's political connections wouldn't save him from the consequences of his own arrogance." "Thank you," I managed when I could speak again. "Thank you for believing in this vision. Thank you for showing us what authentic cultural preservation looks like," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "We look forward to seeing what you build." That evening, Stella and I celebrated at the small restaurant where we'd shared our first real conversation months ago. Over wine and shared pasta, we talked about the future, not just the cultural center, but our future together. "I have something to ask you," I said as dessert arrived. Stella's eyes sparkled with anticipation. "What's that?" "The Cultural Center is going to need a head of historical research and archive management, someone who understands the importance of preserving stories while making them accessible to new generations." "That sounds like an amazing job. I know someone who'd be perfect for it, if she's willing to take a chance on a small nonprofit with big dreams." Stella's smile could have lit up the entire restaurant. "I think she might be interested. Even if it means working closely with the founder on a daily basis? Especially if it means that." We walked home through Richmond streets, bright with autumn moonlight, hand in hand, already planning the center that would honor my grandmother's memory while building something entirely new together. The city felt full of possibility, and for the first time since my grandmother's death, the future looked exactly like home. 6 months after that first autumn afternoon in Elena's shop, I stood in the main hall of the Indigenous Heritage Cultural Center watching children gather around Tommy Rivers as he demonstrated traditional fishing techniques. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating displays of tribal artifacts and historical documents that Stella had carefully curated from our combined research. "The grand opening exceeded every expectation," Stella said, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. 300 visitors on the first day. My grandmother would have loved seeing kids learn the old ways. The center had become everything I'd dreamed and more. Interactive exhibits sharing tribal history, workshop spaces for traditional crafts, and a library, where Stella had created a stunning archive combining documented history with oral traditions. Local schools were already scheduling field trips. "The State Historical Society wants to partner with us on a documentation project," Stella continued, "recording elder testimonies before those voices are lost." "You've been busy." "We've been busy." I loved how naturally she said "we" now, like we'd been a team forever instead of less than a year. The center was officially mine, but every decision had been made together, every success shared equally. Elena appeared with a bottle of champagne she'd been saving for the occasion. "Time for the real celebration," she announced. "Just the 3 women who made this happen." As the last visitor departed and we locked the doors, I felt profound contentment settling over me like a warm blanket. The center would continue growing, touching more lives, preserving more stories. But tonight was about honoring what we'd accomplished together. "I have something for you," I told Stella as Elena poured champagne in my office. "Marina, you already gave me the perfect job. This is different." From my desk drawer, I retrieved the small velvet box I'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Stella's eyes widened as I dropped to one knee beside her chair. "Stella Foster, you walked into my life when I needed hope most. You believed in my grandmother's dream when I was ready to give up. You stood with me against Jake's threats, and helped me fight for what mattered. Her hand covered her mouth, tears gathering in those beautiful blue eyes. You showed me that love means being brave enough to trust someone with everything, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. Marina. Will you marry me? Will you build the rest of this adventure with me? Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, absolutely yes. The ring was simple silver with a small diamond, nothing fancy but chosen with care. It fit perfectly on her finger, like everything else about us had fit from that first moment in the vintage shop. Elena was crying openly as she raised her champagne glass. To love that conquers corporate bastards and bureaucratic bullshit. To partnerships that make both people stronger, Stella added. To my grandmother's dream and our future, I finished. 2 months later, on a crisp December afternoon, we exchanged vows in the forest clearing where we'd fallen in love. Tommy Rivers officiated, incorporating traditional blessings that honored my heritage. Elena served as Stella's maid of honor, while a handful of close friends witnessed our promises under the ancient oaks. Stella wore a vintage dress she'd found at Elena's shop, cream-colored lace that made her look like something from a fairy tale. Her vows spoke of adventures shared and preservation of love the same way we preserved history, carefully, intentionally, with respect for its power to change the future. When we kissed as newly married partners, the forest itself seemed to celebrate. Winter sunlight filtered through bare branches, birds called from the frozen creek, and I felt my grandmother's presence more strongly than ever before. She's here, I whispered against Stella's lips. I know. I can feel her too. The reception was intimate, held in the cultural center surrounded by the artifacts and stories we'd worked so hard to preserve. As our small group of loved ones shared food and laughter, I realized this was exactly what my grandmother had envisioned, community gathered to honor the past while celebrating the future. Late that evening, after our guests had departed and we'd cleaned up the celebration, Stella and I walked through the center one more time. The displays glowed softly in the security lighting, creating a museum of memory and hope. No regrets? I asked, taking her hand as we stood before the exhibit featuring my original forest discovery. Only that your grandmother isn't here to see what we built. She is here. In every story preserved, every tradition passed on, every child who learned something they might have lost forever. We ended up in the children's activity area, sitting on small chairs designed for much shorter people. Stella laughed at the absurdity, her wedding dress spread around her like flower petals. Mrs. White, she said, testing out the sound of her new name. I like how that sounds. Me too. Outside, snow had begun to fall, covering Richmond in pristine white that made everything look fresh and possible. Inside, surrounded by the evidence of our shared work and commitment, the future stretched ahead like an unwritten story waiting for our next chapter. What do you think comes next? Stella asked. More stories to preserve, more children to teach, more adventures together. Sounds perfect. As we turned off the lights and locked up the cultural center that had brought us together, I felt the profound satisfaction of dreams realized and love secured. My grandmother's vision lived on in every artifact displayed, every program offered, every tradition shared with new generations. But more than that, her belief in the power of authentic connection had guided me to Stella, to the partnership that made everything else possible. Love had indeed arrived when I was busy looking for something else, transforming both our lives in ways neither of us could have imagined. That first autumn afternoon when we'd reached for the same vintage jacket and found each other instead. The snow continued falling as we drove home together, Mrs. White and Mrs. White, ready for whatever adventures awaited in the chapters still to be written.